Between March and October of 2019, 47 separate incidents were reported across 6 continents. Divers, fishermen, security personnel, and recreational swimmers all described the same thing: humanoid figures in deep water that moved with purpose, with coordination, with intelligence. These weren't fleeting shadows or tricks of light. These were encounters that ended careers, that silenced entire fishing fleets, that turned professional salvage divers into men who refused to enter the ocean. But that's not what should concern you most. What should concern you is the pattern. Because when you arrange these encounters chronologically, when you map them geographically, when you analyze the behavioral consistency across thousands of miles of coastline, you're left with a conclusion that most marine biologists won't speak about on record. We're not looking at random sightings of an unknown species. We're looking at evidence of systematic observation, of territorial behavior, of coordinated activity that suggests organization, communication, and intent. The footage you're about to see was captured on commercial dive equipment, drilling platform security systems, fishing vessel cameras, and civilian smartphones. None of it has been explained. Much of it has been deliberately suppressed. And all of it points to the same horrifying reality. Something intelligent inhabits the deep ocean, and it's been watching us far longer than we've been watching for it. What follows is a compilation of the most disturbing aquatic humanoid encounters ever documented. Each incident has been verified through equipment logs, witness testimony, and in several cases, physical evidence that defied conventional marine biology. I've arranged them not by location or date, but by the type of encounter, because the behavior patterns matter more than the geography. These aren't myths, they aren't folklore, they're case files. The Bering Titan oil platform sits approximately 180 miles northwest of Alaska's coast in waters that average 320 feet deep. It's been operational since 2003. For the first 7 years of operation, nothing unusual appeared in the security footage. The cameras, mounted at multiple angles to monitor the platform's underwater support structure, captured exactly what they were designed to capture: structural integrity checks, equipment maintenance, occasional marine life passing through the lights. In 2010, that changed. Night shift security operator Marcus Hendricks was the first to notice. His job was to monitor 12 screens simultaneously, cycling through 48 camera feeds on a timed rotation. Each camera held its position for 30 seconds before switching to the next view. Standard procedure. He'd been doing it for 3 years. On May 12th at 2:47 a.m., Camera 8, positioned on the northwest support column at a depth of 60 feet, showed something in the frame's left edge. Hendricks almost missed it. By his account, it registered as wrong before it registered as anything specific. A vertical shape where there shouldn't be one. Humanoid height and proportions, approximately 5.5 feet, pale gray coloring that didn't reflect light the way a wetsuit would. The feed switched to camera 9. Hendricks noted the anomaly in the log, but didn't think much of it. Probably a diver, even though no dive operations were scheduled. Equipment malfunction was more likely, dead pixels forming a pattern his brain interpreted as a figure. Camera 8 cycled back into rotation 30 minutes later. The figure had moved closer. Now it occupied the center of frame, roughly 30 feet from the column. Still, vertical, still motionless. Hendricks could make out more detail: elongated limbs, narrow torso, head shape that was close to human, but not quite right. The proportions were off in a way he couldn't articulate. He called it in to the platform's supervisor. By the time someone reached the security room, the feed had cycled away again. When Camera 8 came back, the figure was gone. Hendricks filed a formal report. The footage was reviewed. The timestamp was verified. The incident was logged as unidentified object in frame, possible equipment shadow, or marine debris. It appeared again 6 nights later. same camera, same depth, same time of night, between 2 and 4 a.m. This time, Hendricks was watching for it. He overrode the automatic rotation and held camera 8 on continuous feed. The figure remained in frame for 8 minutes. It didn't move. It maintained position in open water with no visible means of support, no bubbles indicating breathing apparatus, no propulsion. It simply held itself there, oriented toward the camera, toward the platform. Hendricks described the experience as profoundly unsettling. Not because the figure did anything, because it didn't. It stayed. It watched. And then, when a supply vessel's searchlight swept across the water's surface 200 feet above, the figure descended, straight down, smooth and controlled. It didn't swim. It sank, remaining vertical, until the darkness below the camera's range swallowed it completely. The footage exists. I've seen it. The quality is poor. Industrial security cameras in low-light underwater conditions don't produce HD clarity, but the form is unmistakable. Human shape, inhuman stillness. Here's what matters. It came back. Over the next 14 months, the figure appeared in security footage 73 times, not always camera 8. It cycled through multiple positions around the platform, always at night, always between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., always maintaining the same observational distance of 25 to 40 feet from the structure. The footage began to show multiple figures, 2 at first, positioned at different cameras simultaneously, ruling out the possibility of a single diver moving between shots, then 3, then 5. By November 2011, as many as 7 distinct forms had been documented in a single night, distributed around the platform's support columns in what security personnel began calling a perimeter pattern. They weren't swimming through. They were stationed. Hendricks wasn't the only operator logging these sightings anymore. Every night shift security worker on the Bering Titan had seen them by the end of that year. The reports became routine. 3 entities visible, cameras 4, 9, and 11. Duration, 14 minutes. Departed upon approach of service submersible. The platform supervisor initiated protocol reviews. No dive operations were ever scheduled during the hours when figures appeared. No equipment could account for the forms, no natural phenomenon explained the coordinated positioning or the consistent timing. Marine biologists were consulted off-record. The footage was shown to deep-sea diving experts. The consensus was careful and professional, unknown. Possibly a seal species exhibiting unusual vertical buoyancy control, possibly some form of equipment reflection creating false images across multiple cameras simultaneously. Nobody offered those explanations with conviction. The sightings continued through 2012, 2013, 2014. By 2015, they had become part of the platform's operational reality. Security staff documented them. Engineers checked the footage when structural monitoring showed anomalies. The entities never interfered with equipment, never approached closer than 20 feet, never appeared during daylight or during periods of heavy surface activity. They watched. Then in March of 2016, the pattern changed. Camera 5, positioned on the southeast column at 80 feet, captured footage of an entity approaching the column itself, not hovering at a distance, approaching. It moved in a way the previous footage had never shown, horizontal propulsion, limbs extending and contracting in something that resembled swimming, but operated on mechanics that didn't match human or marine mammal movement. The entity reached the column. It made contact. For 47 seconds, it appeared to examine the structure. Hands. They were recognizable as hands, 5 digits, opposable articulation. Moved across the metal surface, testing it, tracing it. The footage shows deliberate tactile investigation. Then it looked directly at the camera. Hendricks was on shift. He stated in his report that the eye contact, and he used those words, eye contact, was unmistakable despite the distance and the low resolution. The entity's face turned toward the camera. held position for approximately 4 seconds, and then it pushed away from the column and descended out of frame. After that incident, security protocols changed. Floodlights were added to the underwater camera positions. Motion-triggered alarms were installed. The platform supervisor requested additional monitoring equipment and got authorization for permanent underwater drone surveillance during night shifts. The entities disappeared. For 11 months, nothing appeared in the footage. The new lights, the drones, the increased monitoring, all of it captured empty water. The security team began to relax. Incident reports dropped off. The whole phenomenon began to feel like a strange, closed chapter. On February 8, 2017, at 3:14 a.m., every underwater camera on the Bering Titan captured the same thing simultaneously, entities positioned just beyond the reach of the floodlights. Not scattered around the platform this time, arranged in a formation. Hendricks counted 13 distinct figures, evenly spaced, forming a complete circle around the structure at a depth of 70 feet. They remained visible for 19 minutes. The security recording from that night includes audio from the security room. You can hear Hendricks on the radio with the platform supervisor. You can hear the tension in both their voices. Nobody went near the water that night. Nobody launched a drone. Nobody did anything except watch the monitors and wait. At 3:33 a.m., the entities descended in unison, all 13. They dropped into the darkness below camera range within a span of 8 seconds. They haven't been documented on Bering Titan footage since. But here's what should keep you awake. That platform isn't unique. Between 2010 and 2019, 17 offshore drilling operations across 4 oceans reported similar phenomena in security footage. Deepwater Horizon, before the disaster. Thunder Horse in the Gulf. Hibernia off Newfoundland. Troll A platform in Norwegian waters. Humanoid figures. Nighttime observation. Coordinated positioning around industrial structures in deep water. The footage exists in corporate archives, classified as equipment anomalies or maintenance log curiosities. The security personnel who documented these encounters have largely moved on to other work. Many refuse to discuss what they saw. Those who will speak do so off-record, and they all describe the same feeling. They weren't observing wildlife, they were being studied. Commercial saturation diving operates at depths where the ocean becomes fundamentally hostile to human survival. Below 300 feet, the pressure measures over 10 atmospheres. Nitrogen becomes narcotic. Oxygen becomes toxic. Divers breathe specialized gas mixtures, helium and oxygen, in ratios calculated to keep them conscious and functional while their bodies are compressed to fractions of normal volume. These aren't recreational divers exploring coral reefs. These are technical specialists earning between $60,000 and $180,000 per month to perform welding, cutting, and structural repairs on oil rigs, pipelines, and underwater industrial installations in conditions that would kill an unprepared human in minutes. They live in pressurized chambers on support vessels for weeks at a time. When they work, they're lowered in diving bells to depth, then exit into open water wearing bulky atmospheric suits or breathing mixed gas through umbilical systems that connect them to the surface. Helmet-mounted cameras document their work for safety review and quality control. That footage has captured something the oil and gas industry doesn't discuss publicly. Trevor Halstad was a saturation diver for 11 years before he quit in 2018. He worked contracts in the North Sea, the Gulf of Mexico, and offshore West Africa. His specialization was pipeline inspection and emergency repair work at depths between 400 and 650 feet, deep enough that the sun penetrates as only a faint suggestion of direction, where artificial lights create small spheres of visibility in otherwise total darkness. In November of 2016, Halstad was working a 3-week rotation on a support vessel servicing subsea infrastructure off the coast of Angola. The work involved inspection of a pipeline junction at 520 feet, standard job. He'd performed similar tasks dozens of times. On November 18th, during a solo inspection dive, standard protocol for experienced saturation divers on routine tasks, Halstad's helmet cam captured something moving at the edge of his light radius. The footage shows his perspective, the pipeline junction occupying the center of frame, his gloved hands working through a checklist with handheld measurement tools, the darkness beyond compressed into a wall approximately 15 feet away where his lights couldn't penetrate further. At timestamp 1437 into the dive, something crosses through the upper right quadrant of the hull frame, fast enough that it registers as motion blur, pale coloring, elongated form. Halstad's hand movement pauses for 2 seconds. His breathing rate increases audibly on the audio track. Saturation divers breathe gas mixtures that make their voices high-pitched and distorted, but the rhythm of respiration translates clearly. He's seen something. The camera pans right. His light sweeps across empty water. He holds the position for 8 seconds, then returns to his work. 3 minutes later, it happens again. Lower left frame this time. Same blur of movement, same pale coloring. Halstad stops working entirely now. The camera tracks left, then up, then right in a searching pattern. His breathing has shifted from the steady rhythm of focused work to shorter, faster cycles. On the audio recording, you can hear him speak to the dive supervisor on the surface. "Got something moving around me down here." The supervisor's response crackles through. "Marine life? Negative. Too big. Wrong movement." "Can you identify?" "Negative. It's staying outside the light." The supervisor instructs him to complete the inspection and return to the bell. Standard safety protocol when unfamiliar conditions develop. Halstad acknowledges and resumes work, but the helmet cam continues to capture his attention, splitting between the task and scanning the surrounding darkness. At timestamp 2219, the entity enters the light and holds position. The footage is clear enough for detailed analysis. The form is humanoid, vertical orientation, bilateral symmetry, head and torso clearly differentiated, 4 limbs in recognizable configuration, height approximately 6 feet. Coloring is pale gray with darker mottling across what would be the shoulder and upper torso regions. The face is visible, but low resolution makes fine detail impossible to confirm. What is confirmable? 2 eyes, positioned forward like a predator's, not on the sides like prey fish. The shape tracks Halstad's movement. It remains in frame for 4 seconds. Then it retreats backward into the darkness, maintaining its vertical orientation and eye contact with the camera until the light can no longer reach it. Halstad's breathing rate spikes audibly. He reports to the surface, "I need to come up, now." The supervisor asks for clarification. Halstad doesn't provide details over the radio. He secures his tools, performs the mandatory safety check, and returns to the diving bell. The ascent procedure is documented as routine, but the helmet cam footage shows Halstad turning repeatedly during his withdrawal, sweeping his lights across the water behind and above him. Something follows him. The footage shows it 3 separate times during his return to the bell, always at the edge of visibility, always matching his ascent rate, always maintaining the same approximate distance of 12 to 15 feet. It doesn't approach closer. It doesn't fall behind. It paces him for the entire 6-minute return to the bell. When Halstad enters the bell and the hatch seals, the camera catches one final image through the bell's viewport, the entity hovering in the water outside, stationary, watching the bell begin its ascent to the surface. Halstad filed a formal incident report. The footage was reviewed by the diving supervisor and the company's safety coordinator. The conclusion in the official documentation: diver reported large marine animal in work area, Inspection completed without incident, no operational impact. The footage was archived. Halstead completed his 3-week rotation and returned to shore. He accepted his next contract assignment 2 months later, a pipeline repair job in the North Sea at 480 feet. On his second dive of that contract, it happened again. Different ocean, different depth, same phenomenon. The helmet cam footage shows a humanoid form tracking his movement at the perimeter of his lights, maintaining consistent distance, retreating when he attempted to approach for better documentation, reappearing when he resumed work. This time, there were 2 of them. The footage shows them positioned on opposite sides of his work area, approximately 20 feet apart, creating what Halstead later described as a flanking pattern. They didn't coordinate movements in any obvious way, but their positioning remained geometrically consistent. When Halstead moved, they adjusted to maintain the same triangular spatial relationship. He reported it to the surface. The dive supervisor instructed him to abort the task and return to the bell immediately. During his ascent, the helmet cam documented both entities following him, one trailing below and behind, the other pacing him at the same depth off to his right side. When he reached the bell, they remained visible until the hatch sealed, then descended out of frame together. Halstead quit diving after that contract ended. He was 34 years old, in peak physical condition, certified for the most demanding underwater work in the industry, and earning more money than he could make in any land-based profession with his skill set. He refused to go back down. His helmet cam footage still exists in the contractor's digital archives. I've reviewed it along with incident reports from 7 other saturation divers working different locations between 2014 and 2019. The accounts are strikingly consistent. Entities appear at depth beyond 400 feet during solo or 2-person dive operations. They remain at the edge of artificial light radius. They track diver movement. They maintain observation for the duration of the work period. They follow divers during ascent to the bell, but do not approach the bell itself once the diver is inside. In 4 documented cases, the entities were observed making contact with pipeline infrastructure or underwater equipment after the divers retreated, behavior that suggests investigative interest in the technology, not just the human operators. None of the footage shows aggression. No diver has reported physical contact or threatening approach. But every diver who experienced multiple encounters describes the same psychological response: the profound awareness of being evaluated, studied, assessed by something intelligent enough to understand vulnerability. Because at 500 feet below the surface, breathing gas mixtures that would be fatal at any other pressure, connected to survival by an umbilical cord barely thicker than a garden hose, there is no escape route. You can't swim for the surface. You can't fight in a pressurized suit that limits mobility to slow-motion gestures. You can't run. You can only continue working while something watches from the dark, something that moves through that environment faster than you can, something that could cut your umbilical or disable your equipment if it chose to, something that appears to understand exactly how helpless you are at that depth, and it chooses not to. That restraint, according to Halstead and the other divers who've gone on record, is more terrifying than aggression would be, because aggression is instinct, restraint is decision-making, and decision-making requires intelligence, evaluation, and intent. The industry response has been institutional silence. The footage exists, the reports exist, but there are no official acknowledgments, no safety protocol updates, no formal investigations. Divers who speak about their encounters too openly find their contracts aren't renewed. Supervisors who push for incident review are reminded that operational costs are high enough without introducing variables that can't be controlled. The work continues. The cameras continue recording, and in the archived folders of diving contractors operating across every major ocean, helmet cam footage continues accumulating. thousands of hours of deep-water operations where something humanoid appears at the edge of the light, watches the divers work, and follows them home to the bell. The Solvang is a 68-foot commercial fishing trawler operating out of Tromsø, Norway. Captain Erik Johansen has worked Arctic and North Atlantic waters for 31 years, running crews that fish for cod, haddock, and halibut in some of the coldest, roughest maritime conditions on Earth. His father fished the same waters, his grandfather before that. In 3 decades of professional fishing, Johansen never discussed what the old-timers in Tromsø called havfolket, the sea people. It wasn't superstition exactly. It was operational knowledge passed down through generations of fishermen who understood that certain experiences stayed on the boat, certain patterns weren't talked about in port, and certain territorial boundaries were respected without explanation. That silence broke in March of 2018 when Johansen's youngest crew member, a 23-year-old deckhand named Lars Dietrichson, mounted a GoPro camera to document his first season working the northern fishing grounds. The camera was attached to his safety harness, positioned to capture his work hauling lines and processing catch. It captured something else. The footage shows routine operations 70 nautical miles northwest of Tromsø in waters averaging 340 feet deep. It's 11:47 a.m. on March 22nd. Daylight is full, weather conditions are clear, sea state is moderate. Dietrichson is working the starboard gunwale, hauling a long line that's been set for approximately 4 hours at 280-foot depth. The line comes up with fish attached, standard retrieval, cod mostly, in the 15 to 25-pound range. Good catch. Dietrichson works through the practiced motion of unhooking each fish and transferring it to the holding bin. At timestamp 4:12, something takes a fish off the line before he can reach it. The GoPro angle captures it clearly. A pale, elongated arm extends into frame from below the gunwale, grasps a cod that's still hooked to the line, and removes it, hook and all, in a single fluid motion. The arm is visible for less than 2 seconds. No hand breaks the surface. The theft happens entirely below the waterline at a position where the fish was hanging approximately 3 feet under. Dietrichson stops pulling the line. The camera angle shifts as he leans over the gunwale, looking down into the water. The audio captures his voice. "Did you see that?" Another crew member off camera responds, "Keep hauling." Dietrichson resumes pulling line. 40 seconds later, it happens again. Same motion, arm extending into frame, fish removed, arm withdrawing. This time the camera catches more detail. The limb is humanoid in structure, but wrong in proportion. Too long. The hand exhibits what appears to be webbing between digits. Dietrichson calls out again, louder this time. The camera angle swings to show Johansen moving across the deck toward him. The captain's face is visible for 3 seconds. No surprise, no confusion. Just a look that Dietrichson would later describe as recognition and resignation. Johansen tells him to step back from the gunwale. The captain takes over, hauling the line himself. The GoPro footage continues recording from Dietrichson's chest position, now capturing a wider angle of the deck and the water alongside the hull. What happens next appears in the footage with documentary clarity. 3 humanoid figures surface along the starboard side, not breaching like dolphins, not bobbing like seals. They rise vertically until their heads and shoulders clear the waterline, maintaining position in the current without visible effort, keeping pace with the trawler's drift. The camera captures facial features, forward-facing eyes, larger than human proportion, noses present but flattened, mouths clearly visible, moving as if communicating with each other. Skin coloration ranges from gray-green to mottled blue-white. Hair or hair-like structures are visible on 2 of the 3, dark in color and plastered to their skulls by water. They're watching the line being hauled, watching the catch being taken aboard. And their expressions, the footage is clear enough to identify expressions, register what can only be described as territorial aggression. Johansen doesn't stop working. He continues hauling line at a measured pace, removing fish, transferring them to the bin. But his body language has changed. His movements are careful, deliberate, almost ritualistic. He doesn't look at the entities in the water. He doesn't acknowledge them. He simply continues working while maintaining what appears to be a practiced calm. The entities remain at the surface for 2 minutes and 17 seconds. During that time, they take 4 more fish directly off the line as Johansen hauls it, not stealing from the deck, but intercepting the catch while it's still in the water, still technically attached to the gear. They're faster than Johansen can work. When they take a fish, he simply continues to the next one. No reaction, no resistance. Then, as if some unspoken threshold has been reached, they descend, all 3 simultaneously. The water closes over them without splash or disturbance, and they're gone. Johansen completes the line retrieval. The catch is roughly 30% smaller than what the number of baited hooks should have yielded. He says nothing to the crew. Work continues. That night, Dietrichson reviews the GoPro footage in his bunk. The camera captured everything. He shows it to the other crew members. Their response is uniform. Stop recording. Delete the footage. Don't show it to anyone in port. Dietrichson doesn't delete it. When the Solvang returns to Tromsø 6 days later, he posts edited clips to his personal social media account with a caption asking if anyone can identify what he filmed. The response is immediate. Within 48 hours, the footage has been shared across fishing communities throughout Scandinavia. Comments flood in, not expressing shock or disbelief, but recognition. Commercial fishermen from Norway, Iceland, and Scotland respond with their own stories, their own footage, their own experiences of catch being taken by something that surfaces alongside the boat and takes a percentage before disappearing. This wasn't a unique incident. It was standard operational loss, absorbed into the economics of fishing in certain territories, never discussed openly because the moment you acknowledge the pattern, you have to explain why you continue fishing there, why you accept the theft, why you don't report it to maritime authorities or fisheries management. The footage forced that conversation into public space. Within a week, 17 commercial fishing operations had submitted their own video documentation to online forums. GoPro cameras, phone cameras, boat-mounted security systems, all capturing the same phenomenon across different waters. Humanoid figures surfacing near fishing vessels during active retrieval operations, taking catch directly from lines, from nets, from traps. Sometimes taking a few fish, sometimes taking substantial portions of the haul. The behavior is consistent. They don't attack the boats, they don't threaten the crews. They simply take what they want from the catch, and the fishermen who've worked those waters long enough know not to interfere. Johansen finally broke his silence in an interview with a Norwegian maritime publication. He confirmed that his father taught him the protocol when he was 15 years old, working his first season on the family boat. When have folk at surface and take from the lines, you let them take. You don't fight for the fish. You don't try to scare them off. You maintain your work pace. You take what they leave, and you thank the sea you're allowed to take that much. His father learned it from his father. The protocol goes back generations. But it's not just Norwegian waters. Compiled footage from fishing operations in the Bering Sea, the North Atlantic, the waters off Japan, and the coast of Chile show identical encounters. Different species of fish, different vessel sizes, same behavioral pattern from the entities involved. They know when lines are being hauled, they know when nets are being retrieved. They arrive during the active retrieval window, surface near the vessel, and take a portion of the catch. In some footage, they can be seen coordinating with each other, multiple individuals working different sections of a net simultaneously, harvesting fish with speed and efficiency that matches or exceeds the human crew's ability. This is competition. Direct calculated resource competition with an intelligence that understands fishing operations well enough to exploit them. The most disturbing footage comes from a long-line fishing operation off the coast of Alaska, recorded in July of 2017. The vessel's deck camera shows retrieval operations in progress when 6 humanoid figures surface in formation around the boat. They don't take fish randomly. They move systematically down the line as it's hauled, selecting specific fish, the largest specimens, and leaving smaller ones on the hooks. They're not scavenging. They're optimizing their take, demonstrating selectivity that requires assessment and decision-making. The crew continues working. Nobody interferes. The entities take approximately 40% of the viable catch, then descend in the same coordinated manner they surfaced. The operation continues as if nothing happened, because in that crew's operational reality, nothing unusual did happen. This was Tuesday. Fishermen who've submitted footage describe the psychological adaptation required. You learn to think of it as a tax, not a theft. You calculate it into your projected haul. You know that certain fishing grounds come with certain costs, and you either accept those costs or you fish elsewhere. But the acceptance comes with conditions. You don't talk about it where it can be recorded. You don't file insurance. Claims for lost catch that you can't explain through weather or equipment failure. You don't push back when they surface because the older fishermen remember what happens when territorial boundaries aren't respected. There are accounts, never verified with footage, always delivered second-hand or third-hand, of boats that tried to defend their catch. Crews that used gaffs or boat hooks, or in one case a firearm to drive the entities away from their lines. Those boats experienced escalation. Nets shredded underwater by something with access to the gear before it surfaces, lines cut at depth. In extreme cases, equipment sabotage that forced vessels back to port for repairs that cost more than a season's worth of shared catch would have. The entities don't just take fish, they enforce terms. And fishermen who've worked those waters long enough have learned that the terms are non-negotiable. The footage exists now in public archives, spread across maritime forums and fishing community networks. It documents a reality that coastal populations have managed through cultural silence for generations. Humans are not the only intelligent species harvesting the ocean, and we maintain access to those resources through an arrangement we didn't negotiate and don't control. We're allowed to fish. In exchange, we surrender a portion of what we take. The percentage varies by location and by season, but the pattern holds across oceans. Dietrichson's GoPro footage didn't reveal a mystery. It exposed a treaty that fishermen have been honoring without ever formally acknowledging its existence, because the moment you acknowledge it, you have to confront what it means about who actually controls the water and what happens if they decide our percentage is too high. Security systems at closed public beaches operate on simple logic: monitor the property after hours, document vandalism or trespassing, provide evidence if something is stolen or damaged. The cameras run continuous loops, motion-activated lighting triggers when someone crosses into restricted zones, and morning staff review flagged footage for incidents worth reporting. In February of 2017, maintenance workers at Crane Beach, a public recreation area north of Boston, began finding evidence that didn't match their security footage timeline. The evidence was consistent: displaced objects on the beach. Trash receptacles moved from their mounted positions. Lifeguard equipment removed from locked storage boxes whose locks showed no signs of forced entry. Footprints in sand that appeared overnight in areas the cameras showed empty. The footage should have captured whoever was responsible. But it didn't, because the incidents were occurring in the gap between motion sensor range and camera coverage, a narrow window of space where something could move along the waterline without triggering the automated systems. David Ortega, head of facilities management, made the logical decision in March: expand camera coverage to eliminate the blind spot. 2 additional cameras were installed covering the surfline approach, positioned to capture anything entering from the water after the beach closed at sunset. The first week of expanded coverage produced nothing unusual. Standard footage of empty beach, tidal movement, occasional seabirds. The second week captured arrival. March 19th, 2:47 a.m. Camera 4, positioned to cover the northern surfline approach, records a figure emerging from the water. The footage is clear. High-definition digital system, recent installation, proper lighting configuration from nearby parking area, illumination reflecting off the sand. The figure is humanoid, vertical posture, bipedal movement, height approximately 5.5 feet. It walks out of the surf zone with a gait that reads as wrong, joints articulating at angles that don't match human biomechanics but functional, purposeful. It crosses 20 feet of beach, stops at a trash receptacle. Spends 18 seconds examining it. The footage shows hands clearly visible, manipulating the receptacle's lid, tilting the container, investigating its construction. Then it moves to a lifeguard stand, climbs the ladder. The motion is fluid, but alien, too fast, too smooth, lacking the hesitation a human would show ascending unfamiliar structure in darkness. At the top of the stand, the figure pauses, visible in profile against parking area lights. The head turns left, then right, scanning the beach in what appears to be systematic observation. After 41 seconds, it descends, returns to the waterline, enters the surf. Gone. Ortega reviewed the footage the next morning during routine security check. His first assumption was human trespasser, swimmer or diver, entering after hours for reasons unclear. He flagged it for police review. But two details stopped him from filing an immediate report. First, the figure's skin. Even in low-light conditions, the coloring was visible, pale gray with darker patches across the back and shoulders. Not wetsuit material. The texture was organic, the mottling irregular in a way synthetic material doesn't produce. Second, no equipment, no tank, no fins, no mask. The figure emerged from open ocean at 2:47 a.m. in March, water temperatures around 42 degrees Fahrenheit, stayed on land for just under 2 minutes, and returned to the water without any visible breathing apparatus or thermal protection. Ortega kept the footage internal and waited to see if it happened again. It happened again that night. Same timeline, 2:51 a.m., same camera, different figure, or the same one exhibiting different behavior. This time it didn't stop at the trash receptacle or lifeguard stand. It moved directly to the beach shower stations, 30 feet from the surf line. Spent 2 minutes manipulating the fixtures, turned the handles, tested the shower heads. The motion was investigative, methodical. Then it walked the length of the beach access path, 70 feet inland, approaching within 40 feet of the parking area where Ortega's vehicle was parked overnight. The figure stopped at the boundary between sand and pavement, stood motionless for 19 seconds, oriented toward the parking area, toward human infrastructure, toward the edge of what could be considered territorial boundary. Then it returned to the water. Ortega expanded the camera review, pulled footage from the previous 8 weeks before the new cameras were installed, checking the original coverage angles for anything he'd missed. He found it. Lower resolution, marginal angles, but present. Figures appearing in frame edges, in the far background of shots focused on other areas. Always nighttime, always between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. Always arriving from the water, interacting with beach infrastructure for brief periods, then returning to the ocean. The new cameras hadn't created the phenomenon, they'd just documented it clearly for the first time. Over the next 6 weeks, Ortega compiled 19 separate incidents, different nights, different times within the early morning window, different figures. He could distinguish at least 4 distinct individuals based on size and movement patterns. Their behavior showed progression. Early footage, brief visits, minimal interaction with objects, retreat when car headlights appeared on the access road. Later footage, extended time on land, systematic investigation of multiple structures per visit, less reactive to distant vehicle lights or sound. By April, the figures were accessing the locked lifeguard equipment storage. The cameras captured one individual spending 4 minutes examining a rescue buoy, manipulating the rope, testing the buoy's flotation by partially submerging it in the shore break, then retrieving it. Problem-solving behavior, tool assessment. Another figure was recorded attempting to open the beach bathroom facilities. The door was locked. The footage shows the entity testing the handle repeatedly, applying pressure from different angles, examining the lock mechanism. After 90 seconds of failed entry, it moved to the bathroom's exterior shower fixture and spent 3 minutes operating the valve, watching the water flow, interrupting the flow with its hands positioned at different points in the stream. This wasn't scavenging, this was research. Ortega finally brought the footage to local police in late April. Their response was institutional uncertainty. No crime was being committed, no property was damaged, nothing was stolen. Trespassing laws were ambiguous for beings that might not qualify as human. The case was forwarded to state environmental police. They reviewed the footage and kicked it to NOAA. NOAA's regional office reviewed it and suggested Ortega contact marine mammal specialists. The specialists looked at the footage and confirmed what Ortega already knew. This wasn't seal behavior, wasn't sea lion activity, wasn't any cataloged marine species. No agency had protocol for this. So Ortega did what facilities managers do when official channels fail. He adjusted operations to manage the situation locally. He installed additional lighting to reduce shadows where the figures approached from the water. He secured equipment in reinforced storage. He began logging each incident in an unofficial record that documented behavior patterns without attempting to explain what was creating them. The incidents continued through summer. Frequency increased slightly. 27 documented visits between May and August. The figures grew bolder, multiple individuals appearing simultaneously, longer duration on land, interaction with more complex infrastructure. In June, cameras captured 2 entities working together to manipulate a beach wheelchair, an accessibility device stored near the access path. They moved it 15 feet, examined its wheels, tested its frame structure, then returned it to approximately its original position. Cooperation, coordinated investigation. July footage showed an entity accessing a trash receptacle, removing objects, examining them individually, a plastic bottle, a discarded beach toy, a food wrapper, then replacing most items before returning to the water. Selectivity, assessment of human artifacts. Ortega wasn't the only facilities manager documenting this pattern. In September of 2017, coastal beach management operations from Cape Cod to North Carolina began sharing footage through professional networks. 14 separate beach facilities reported identical phenomena. Nighttime visitors emerging from the surf, investigating human infrastructure, demonstrating increasingly complex interaction with equipment and facilities, then retreating to the ocean before sunrise. The timeline correlation was significant. Activity increased during late summer months when beaches saw heaviest human daytime traffic. The entities were visiting locations that thousands of people occupied during daylight hours, conducting what appeared to be systematic investigation when those people were gone. They were learning our patterns, our schedules, our technology, and the behavior was accelerating. By late 2018, footage from Crane Beach showed entities accessing areas that required navigating locked gates, not breaking the locks, but finding routes around barriers, demonstrating spatial problem-solving. One incident captured an entity climbing a 10-foot fence to access a storage area, spending 6 minutes inside, examining maintenance equipment, then exiting the same way it entered. The visiting pattern had evolved from brief shore excursions to calculated facility infiltration. Ortega installed his final camera upgrade in January of 2019, infrared system with motion tracking, covering approaches from the water that previous equipment couldn't monitor in full darkness. The footage it captured eliminated any remaining ambiguity about what was happening. January 23rd, 3:17 a.m. Infrared camera. 4 records, 7 figures emerging from the surf simultaneously. They move in formation up the beach, spread out to investigate different structures, lifeguard stands, storage facilities, shower stations, trash receptacles, spending an average of 4 minutes per location before regrouping at the waterline. The behavior is organized, systematic. They're not random visitors. They're conducting coordinated reconnaissance of human coastal infrastructure. Before retreating to the water, the group assembles near the access path. The infrared footage shows them in formation, oriented toward the parking area, toward the facility building, toward the human territory beyond the beach boundary. They hold that position for 32 seconds. Then they enter the surf and disappear. Ortega submitted his complete footage archive to federal authorities in February 2019. 19 months of documentation, over 60 separate incidents, clear evidence of non-human intelligence conducting systematic observation of human coastal facilities with increasing sophistication and coordination. The official response was administrative silence. No investigation was opened. No public statement was issued. His footage was received, logged, and filed. But the incidents didn't stop. Security systems at public beaches across the Atlantic coast, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Pacific Northwest have continued documenting the same pattern. The footage accumulates in municipal archives and private security company servers, thousands of hours of nighttime beach surveillance showing humanoid figures emerging from the ocean to investigate, test, and map human coastal infrastructure before withdrawing to the water. We control the beaches during daylight. We set the schedules, post the rules, install the equipment, define the boundaries, but when we leave, something else arrives. And it's not visiting randomly, it's studying systematically, learning what we build, how we build it, where we place it, how it functions. The entities know our technology now. They've examined our rescue equipment, our access infrastructure, our waste management systems, our accessibility devices. They've tested our locks, navigated our barriers, and mapped our facility layouts. They know when we arrive and when we leave. They know the gaps in our surveillance. They know the boundaries we maintain. And they're visiting more frequently, staying longer, penetrating deeper into human territory with each documented encounter. The cameras captured them arriving from the ocean. Nobody has footage of where they go when they leave. Recreational wreck diving operates on a simple premise. Descend to a sunken vessel, explore the structure, document what you find, surface before your air runs out. The wrecks themselves are frozen monuments, ships that went down decades or centuries ago, now serving as artificial reefs and underwater museums for divers with the training to reach them. The SS Stavanger, a Norwegian freight vessel that sank in 1964, sits in 127 feet of water, 19 nautical miles off the coast of northern Scotland. It's a popular dive site. The wreck is intact enough to be interesting, shallow enough to be accessible to advanced recreational divers, and well documented in diving guides throughout the UK. Michael Caro had dived the Stavanger 4 times before April of 2018. He knew the wreck's layout, knew the entry points into the cargo holds, knew which sections were safe to penetrate, and which had deteriorated beyond safe exploration. He was an experienced technical diver with certifications in wreck penetration and deep diving. On April 14th, he returned to the Stavanger with 2 dive partners for what should have been a routine exploration dive. All 3 carried helmet-mounted cameras to document the wreck's current condition, standard practice for divers who share footage with wreck preservation databases. Caro's camera was recording when they reached the wreck at 11:38 a.m. The descent footage shows normal conditions, clear water, good visibility, the wreck's superstructure coming into view as they dropped below 100 feet. The three divers separated slightly to explore different sections. Planned procedure, each maintaining visual contact with at least one other diver. Caro moved toward the cargo hold entrance on the port side. His camera captures him approaching the opening, checking his gas supply, preparing to enter the interior structure. At timestamp 6:47, something moves inside the hold. The footage shows it clearly, a pale form withdrawing deeper into the wreck's interior as Caro's light reaches into the space. Fast movement, humanoid shape, there for 2 seconds, then gone into the darkness beyond where his light could penetrate. Caro stops at the entrance. The camera angle shows him holding position, sweeping his light across the interior space. Nothing visible now. He signals to his nearest dive partner, the hand signal for, "Did you see that?" The partner approaches, both divers positioned at the hold entrance, lights illuminating the interior, empty, rusted metal, and scattered debris. No movement. They enter together. The cargo hold interior is a cathedral of corroded steel, support beams, collapsed decking, sediment layers built up over 54 years underwater. Caro's camera captures the environment in sweeping pans as they move through the space. At timestamp 9:12, they find the modification. It's not degradation, it's not salvage damage, it's deliberate structural alteration. A section of the hold's starboard wall has been removed, not collapsed, removed. The metal plating has been peeled back in a manner that exposes an interior space that shouldn't be accessible. A gap approximately 4 feet wide, leading into what would have been a sealed storage compartment in the original vessel design. The edges of the opening show marks. Caro moves closer to examine them. His camera captures detail. The metal has been bent with force, gripped, and pulled until it's separated from the frame. The bend patterns are consistent with manual manipulation, not mechanical cutting or explosive salvage. Something made this opening by hand. Caro exchanges signals with his partner. They're both seeing it. Both recognizing that this damage is recent. The exposed metal shows minimal rust development compared to the surrounding deteriorated structure. Caro positions his camera to illuminate the gap and looks through. The space beyond is occupied. His light reveals a chamber that's been cleared of debris. The footage shows an area approximately 10 feet across where sediment has been removed from the floor, where loose objects have been pushed to the perimeter, where the space has been organized in a way that wreckage doesn't organize itself. And in the back corner, arranged in a pattern that Caro's footage captures clearly, objects that don't belong to the Stavanger's original cargo. Fishing equipment, modern fishing equipment, a net, folded and stacked. A plastic storage crate, the kind used on commercial fishing vessels, manufactured decades after the Stavanger sank. A dive knife in a nylon sheath. Caro's breathing rate increases audibly on his regulator. He's looking at a cache, a storage site. Evidence that something is using this wreck not as a monument, but as occupied space. He moves to enter the chamber for closer documentation. His dive partner grabs his arm. The camera swings to show the partner's face through their mask, eyes wide, head shaking firmly. The signal is clear, don't go in there. Caro hesitates, looks back at the chamber, looks at his partner. The decision gets made for them. Movement erupts from deeper in the cargo hold behind their position. The camera catches it in the edge of frame as Caro spins, multiple forms moving fast through the wreck's interior, converging on their location from different directions. Both divers react with trained emergency procedure, exit the confined space immediately. They move back toward the cargo hold entrance together, maintaining contact, moving as quickly as safe ascent allows through the wreck's interior. Caro's camera captures 3 distinct entities during the withdrawal. Humanoid forms, gray-pale coloring, moving through the wreck structure with speed that shouldn't be possible in that environment, navigating around obstacles, through openings, across deteriorated decking that the divers had to carefully cross. The entities don't attack, they pursue, pacing the divers' retreat, maintaining distance of roughly 15 feet, following them out of the cargo hold and into open water. Once clear of the wreck, Caro and his partner ascend toward their third teammate, who's positioned above the structure at 80 feet. The camera shows the entities holding position at the cargo hold entrance, watching the divers leave, not following into open water. They're defending territory. The three divers surface, complete their safety stop, return to their boat. Caro's camera remains recording through the entire ascent, no further contact with the entities, but the psychological impact is visible in the divers' rapid exit procedure and their immediate discussion on the surface about what they witnessed. Caro posted his footage to a technical diving forum that evening with a detailed description of the encounter. The response was not what he expected. 17 other wreck divers replied within 24 hours, each reporting similar experiences at different wreck sites across UK waters, the North Sea, and the Norwegian coast. The HMS Curacoa, a Royal Navy cruiser sunk in 1942, lying in 120 feet of water off the Irish coast. Divers report finding cleared spaces inside the wreck, areas that show evidence of regular habitation and aggressive defensive behavior when those areas are approached. The MV Captayanus, a cargo ship that sank off Scotland in 1974, multiple dive teams have documented humanoid figures retreating into the wreck's interior when divers arrive, then reappearing to observe from inside the structure as the divers explore exterior sections. The SS Politician, famous for its whiskey cargo, resting at 100 feet in the Hebrides, divers describe being escorted away from certain sections of the wreck by entities that don't make physical contact, but maintain close proximity until the divers move to different areas. The pattern is consistent across dozens of wreck sites. The entities are using the structures, living in them, storing objects in them, defending specific sections while allowing divers access to others, territorial behavior that suggests established residence and defined boundaries. Caro returned to the Stavanger 3 weeks later with the intention of documenting the cargo hold chamber more thoroughly. He didn't get close. His footage from that dive shows multiple entities visible at the wreck site before he reached it, positioned on the structure's exterior, clearly visible, clearly waiting. When Caro and his team descended to within 30 feet of the wreck, the entities moved to blocking positions at the major entry points. The message was unmistakable. Access denied. Caro attempted to approach the cargo hold entrance anyway. Two entities moved to intercept, not attacking but positioning themselves directly in his path. When he tried to maneuver around them, they adjusted their position to maintain the blockade. One of them made contact. The footage shows a hand, webbed fingers, pale gray skin, clearly visible, placed against Caro's chest. Not striking, not grabbing, just pressing. Firm pressure. The entity held that contact for 3 seconds while maintaining eye contact with Caro through his mask, then it pushed him backward. Gentle, but decisive. The meaning was communication, not combat. Caro didn't resist. He ascended with his team. He hasn't returned to the Stavanger since, but other divers have. The wreck remains a popular dive site. It's still listed in guidebooks, still recommended in diving forums, still visited by recreational and technical divers who have no knowledge of what's occupying the interior. Those divers are encountering the entities now with increasing frequency. Reports submitted to UK diving safety organizations describe unusual marine life at wreck sites. Diving instructors mention territorial fish behavior at certain locations. Insurance companies have noted an uptick in aborted dives at specific wreck coordinates, where divers surface early citing equipment concerns or visibility issues. The real reason doesn't appear in official reports because there's no protocol for documenting it. You can't file a safety incident report that says humanoid entities inhabiting the wreck prevented access to planned dive site through coordinated defensive positioning. You can't request a dive site closure based on evidence that an unknown intelligent species has colonized the structure and is actively defending it against human intrusion. You can't explain to insurance providers that the wreck isn't an abandoned monument anymore. It's occupied territory, and the occupants are enforcing boundaries. So the encounters continue. The footage accumulates. Divers share videos privately, discuss the phenomenon in closed forums, adjust their dive plans to avoid sections of wrecks that have shown defensive activity. A new protocol is developing organically among experienced wreck divers. Respect the occupied zones. Don't approach cleared chambers. Don't attempt to retrieve objects from storage areas. Don't press access when entities position themselves to block entry. Treat the wrecks like what they become, not grave sites to explore, but habitats to respect. Because the alternative is escalation, and the entities have already demonstrated they understand escalation. After Caro's encounter, 2 more dive teams attempted to access the Stavanger's cargo hold despite visible entity presence. Both teams reported equipment interference, regulators free-flowing, cameras malfunctioning, dive computers displaying error codes that forced immediate ascent. Technical failure during wreck penetration diving is potentially fatal. The entities appear to understand that. The wrecks sit in the same positions they've occupied for decades. The coordinates haven't changed. The structures are still there, but they're not ours anymore. Ryan Castellanos was 29 years old when he decided to paddle from Santa Barbara to the Channel Islands alone, a 23-mile crossing he'd completed 6 times before in various conditions. He was an experienced ocean kayaker, certified in marine navigation, and physically conditioned for multi-hour endurance paddling in open water. He mounted 2 cameras to document the crossing. One GoPro affixed to his bow, facing forward to capture the approach to the islands. Another attached to his PFD harness, angled to record his paddling technique and the water alongside the kayak. He launched at 6:12 a.m. on August 3, 2018. Weather conditions were optimal: clear sky, light wind, calm sea state. He'd filed a float plan with the Harbor Patrol. Expected arrival at Anacapa Island was 12:30 p.m. Both cameras were recording when contact began. The bow camera footage shows routine progression for the first hour: steady paddling rhythm, consistent speed, the islands growing larger on the horizon. Castellanos maintains his course, checking his GPS periodically, adjusting for minor current drift. At timestamp 1:14:37, something bumps the kayak from below. The boat rocks slightly, not enough to destabilize it, but enough that Castellanos stops paddling for 2 strokes. The PFD camera captures his body language: brief pause, head turning to scan the water around him, then resuming his paddle rhythm. Standard response to kelp or minor debris contact. It happens again at 1:16:22, harder this time. The kayak lifts slightly and shifts 3 degrees off course. Castellanos braces with his paddle, stabilizes, scans the water again. The bow camera shows nothing: clear blue water in all directions. No kelp beds, no floating debris, no visible marine life. Castellanos speaks to himself. The audio captures it clearly. What the hell was that? He adjusts course, resumes paddling, increased stroke rate. He's covering distance faster now, departing from his planned, sustainable pace. At 1 hour, 19 minutes, and 4 seconds, the bow camera captures it. A pale shape passes beneath the kayak from port to starboard, visible for 3 seconds in the clear water below. Elongated form, humanoid structure, swimming parallel to Castellanos' course at a depth of approximately 8 feet. It matches his speed exactly, then accelerates ahead and disappears beyond the camera's forward view. Castellanos stops paddling completely. The PFD camera shows him leaning forward, looking down into the water alongside the hull. His breathing has changed, shorter cycles, audible tension. For 42 seconds, nothing happens. He drifts, scanning, waiting. Then it surfaces. 20 feet ahead of the kayak, directly in his path. Vertical rise from depth, head and shoulders breaking the surface without splash or disturbance. The ball camera captures it in full frame, forward-facing eyes, flattened facial structure, skin coloration, mottled gray-blue, mouth visible, closed, expression unreadable, eye contact. The entity holds position in the water, maintaining visual focus on Castellanos, who has stopped moving entirely. The PFD camera shows his paddle frozen mid-stroke, his body motionless. For 19 seconds, they remain stationary, the entity in the water ahead. Castellanos in the kayak, neither approaching, neither retreating. Then the entity descends, smooth vertical drop, eyes holding contact until the water closes over its head. Castellanos doesn't resume paddling immediately. The PFD camera captures him reaching for his radio, attempting to contact Harbor Patrol. The audio records his transmission. "This is Kayak 2-1. I'm seeing something in the water. Large marine animal, unknown species." Harbor Patrol responds, requests his position. Castellanos provides coordinates. They ask if he's in distress. He hesitates before answering, "Negative, not in distress. Just reporting contact." Harbor Patrol logs the report, asks if he's continuing his crossing. Another hesitation. Then, "Affirmative," continuing to Anacapa. He resumes paddling, faster now. The bow camera shows his stroke rate has increased 20% above his sustainable pace. He's trying to cover distance quickly. At 1:31:18, it bumps him again. Port side this time, hard enough that water splashes over the gunwale. The kayak rocks violently. Castellanos braces, stabilizes, looks to port. The PFD camera captures what he sees, the entity surfacing alongside the kayak, 5 feet away, keeping pace as he drifts. It's swimming on its side, one arm extended, watching him. Castellanos backpaddles, creating distance. The entity maintains position, matching his movement. When he stops, it stops. When he attempts to paddle forward, it adjusts course to remain alongside. It's pacing him, studying his response. Castellanos changes tactics, aggressive, forward paddling, attempting to outrun it. The bow camera shows him driving the kayak hard, maximum stroke rate, pulling away from the entity's last visible position. For 90 seconds, it works. No contact, no visible pursuit. Then the bow camera captures 3 of them ahead. They surface in formation, one directly in his path, 2 positioned 15 feet to either side, equidistant spacing, coordinated timing. They're not intercepting randomly. They've positioned themselves to block forward progress. Castellanos stops paddling. His breathing rate spikes audibly. The PFD camera shows him looking left, right, behind. The audio captures his voice. "Oh God, oh God." He reaches for his radio again. "Harbor Patrol, Kayak 2-1. I need assistance. I'm surrounded. Multiple contacts. Unknown animals. They're not letting me through." Harbor Patrol requests clarification. Castellanos tries to explain, his voice breaking with tension. "They're in formation, ahead of me. They're blocking my course." Harbor Patrol asks if he's been physically contacted. Castellanos confirms minor contact, no injury. They advise him to alter course, move away from the contacts. He acknowledges. He turns the kayak 90 degrees, attempting to paddle perpendicular to his original course. The entities adjust. The bow camera shows them repositioning, maintaining the same triangular formation relative to his new heading. They're not letting him choose direction. They're hurting him. Castellanos stops trying to flee. He drifts, paddle across his lap, breathing in ragged cycles. The PFD camera captures his hands shaking. For 6 minutes, nothing changes. The entities hold position ahead. Castellanos drifts in place. Nobody approaches, nobody retreats. Then one of them dives. The bow camera shows it descending, disappearing into the deeper water. 10 seconds later, something hits the kayak from directly below. Hard impact, centered under the seat, lifting the bow 18 inches out of the water. Castellanos shouts. The kayak crashes back down. Water floods over the sides. He's bracing, fighting to stay upright, paddle working frantically to stabilize. The entity surfaces again ahead, rejoining the formation. The message is clear. They can capsize him whenever they choose. Castellanos grabs his radio, voice breaking now. "I need immediate assistance. They're attacking the boat. I'm 9 miles from Anacapa. I can't get away from them." Harbor Patrol dispatches a rescue vessel, ETA 45 minutes. They instruct him to deploy his emergency beacon and maintain position. Castellanos activates his beacon. The PFD camera shows his hands fumbling with the device, fingers barely functional from adrenaline. For the next 38 minutes, the entities maintain their formation. They don't approach closer. They don't strike the kayak again. They simply hold position, ensuring Castellanos can't resume his crossing, can't paddle toward the islands, can't do anything except wait for rescue. When the Coast Guard vessel appears on the horizon, the entities descend simultaneously, all three. The bow camera captures them dropping vertically into deeper water within a span of 4 seconds. By the time the rescue vessel reaches Castellanos, the water is empty. He was retrieved at 2:47 p.m. Physical condition, uninjured. Psychological condition, severe distress. His kayak showed impact damage to the hull's underside, dents consistent with upward striking force. His cameras captured everything. The Coast Guard report classified the incident as marine animal interference, species unidentified. Castellanos was advised not to attempt solo crossings in that area again. He never went back on the ocean. His kayak is for sale. His cameras are in storage. But his footage circulated through kayaking communities and open water paddling forums. Other solo kayakers came forward with similar accounts, entities pacing them miles from shore, bumping their boats during moments of exhaustion, surfacing ahead to block progress during long crossings. The pattern is tactical. They don't attack immediately. They observe. They test. They wait until the kayaker is far enough from shore that rescue is delayed, isolated enough that there are no witnesses, exhausted enough that resistance is minimal. Then they make contact. 3 more solo kayakers reported nearly identical encounters off the California coast between August 2018 and January 2019. 2 off Washington State, 1 near Vancouver Island, all involving formation positioning, coordinated blocking behavior, and deliberate strikes to the hull from below when the kayaker attempted to flee. All of them were forced to call for rescue. All of them quit solo ocean kayaking afterward. 2 kayaks were recovered empty in that same time frame. Both were found drifting miles offshore with no sign of their operators. Both showed impact damage to the hull consistent with upward strikes. Both had cameras that stopped recording when the kayaker went into the water. The footage from those cameras was never released publicly. Castellanos' recording ends when the Coast Guard pulled him from his kayak. But before the rescue, during those 38 minutes of waiting while the entities held him in place, the bow camera captured something he didn't notice in the moment. Behind the formation ahead, visible in the distance at the edge of frame clarity, more shapes were moving, dozens of them, circling at depth. A coordinated group maintaining perimeter position around the 3 entities holding Castellanos stationary. He wasn't being hunted by 3, he was being contained by a coordinated pod while the larger group observed. They were learning what humans do when isolated in their territory, how we call for help, how long rescue takes, what our capabilities are when we're alone, exhausted, and surrounded. And when they'd learned enough, they let him go. Child psychologist Dr. Sarah Veneman began noticing the pattern in late 2016. 4 separate families from coastal areas near Portland, Maine had brought children to her practice within a 6-week span, different ages, ranging from 5 to 9 years old, different family circumstances, no connection between the families. But the children's drawings were nearly identical, tall figures with 2 long arms, gray-blue coloring, large eyes positioned forward on faces the children described as Wrong. And every single drawing showed these figures in water, watching toward shore, watching toward the children. The parents reported the same behavioral change. Their children refused to swim anymore. Kids who'd loved beach days now screamed when brought near the water. One 7-year-old stopped bathing, terrified of any submersion. A 6-year-old started having nightmares severe enough to require sleep medication. The adults dismissed it as overactive imagination, media influence, something they'd seen in a movie. But 3 weeks later, 2 commercial fishermen reported aggressive encounters with humanoid entities in the exact waters where these children's families had been swimming that summer. Sea Life Marine Research Facility in La Jolla houses 14 rescue animals, seals, sea lions, and 2 bottlenose dolphins recovering from various injuries before release consideration. The facility operates 24-hour monitoring through cameras positioned throughout the complex, inside tanks, and along exterior pools that connect to open ocean through filtered intake systems. Night Security Supervisor Patricia Chen noticed the first incident on September 9, 2018. The resident harbor seals refused to enter the water during evening feeding. 7 animals clustered on the platform, vocalizing distress, ignoring food, exhibiting behavior she'd never seen in 4 years of facility operation. The exterior pool camera showed why. Something was on the other side of the reinforced glass viewing panel, watching back. 47 incidents, 6 continents, 8 months. The footage exists in corporate security archives, Coast Guard databases, municipal servers, and personal hard drives. Nobody disputes the recordings. What they dispute is the conclusion. But when you map the encounters, when you compile the behavioral patterns, when you analyze the progression from observation to interaction to territorial enforcement, you're not looking at random sightings anymore. You're looking at systematic activity, coordinated intelligence, calculated escalation. 80% of our oceans remain unexplored, and the evidence suggests we've been sharing them with something that's been watching us far longer than we've acknowledged. The question isn't whether they exist. The question is what happens when they stop watching and start responding.